I walked into my parents' 32nd anniversary dinner expecting a hug, but I found dirty dishes and cold coffee. They had finished without me. Instead of saving me a slice of cake, my mother slid a bill for nearly $2,000 across the table, claiming I should pay since I missed the meal. My brother laughed and called me their ATM. That night, I did not just tear up the check. I realized my family had been stealing far more than just my money. My name is Daniela Webb, and for the last 9 hours, I had been the only thing standing between a 40-foot container of perishable pharmaceuticals and a bureaucratic black hole in a rail yard outside of Omaha. My official title at Iron Line Nexus Freight Works was Logistics Coordinator, but my actual job description was closer to Professional Crisis Negotiator. I had spent the entire afternoon screaming politely into a headset, juggling 3 different tracking systems, and bargaining with a dispatch manager who seemed to think time zones were merely a suggestion. By the time I finally got the confirmation code that the shipment was moving again, my blouse was wrinkled, my hair was a static mess, and my cortisol levels were high enough to power a small city. I slumped into the driver's seat of my sedan, the leather cold against my back, and checked the dashboard clock. It was 6:45 in the evening. The invitation for my parents' 32nd wedding anniversary dinner had said 6:30. I was late, but I was not disastrously late. If I drove fast, I could make it to the Copper Lantern Bistro in 20 minutes. I would miss the appetizers, maybe the first round of drinks, but I would be there for the main course. I would be there for the speeches. I would be the good daughter. The drive through Riverton was a nightmare of slick asphalt and blinding taillights. The Colorado weather had decided to turn hostile, dumping a freezing rain that sheeted against my windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Every red light felt like a personal insult. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind still half stuck on the logistics of the lost container, while the other half began the familiar, nauseating slide into family anxiety. I rehearsed my apologies as I drove. I'm so sorry. Work was crazy. I'm so sorry. I couldn't leave. I'm so sorry. It was a mantra I had been reciting for most of my adult life. I pulled into the parking lot of the Copper Lantern Bistro at 7:10. The restaurant was one of those riverside establishments that charged $40 for a plate of pasta because you could see the water. Even though it was pitch black outside and raining sideways, I ran from my car to the entrance, shielding my head with my purse, my heels clicking frantically on the wet pavement. I took a deep breath in the foyer, smoothed my blazer, and tried to arrange my face into an expression of cheerful celebration. I walked into the private dining room at the back, ready to launch into my apology, but the words died in my throat. The room was warm, smelling of roasted garlic, red wine, and expensive perfume. A long table dominated the center of the space, seated with 14 people: my parents, my brother Miles, aunts, uncles, and a few cousins. But there was no food on the table. Or rather, there was no food left. The white tablecloth was littered with the debris of a finished meal: crumpled linen napkins stained with sauce, empty bread baskets with just a few crumbs remaining, and wine glasses that had been drained to the dregs. Waiters were already circulating, clearing away plates smeared with the remnants of ribeye steaks and lobster tails. At the center of the table, a large silver platter that had evidently held a cake was now just a surface of smeared chocolate frosting and a few stray strawberries. They had not just started without me. They had finished without me. I stood there, freezing water dripping from the hem of my blazer onto the plush carpet, feeling entirely too large and entirely invisible all at once. For a long moment, nobody looked at me. They were too busy laughing at a joke my Uncle Jerry was telling, picking their teeth, or checking their phones. It was as if I was a ghost haunting my own family gathering. Then my mother, Elaine, turned her head. She did not smile. She did not look relieved. Her eyes swept over me with a critical, chilly precision, noting the rain-dampened hair and the lack of a gift in my hands. She sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the matriarch in a shimmering navy dress that I knew cost more than my rent, because I was the one who had transferred the money to her account for it 2 weeks ago. "You are late, Daniela," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the ambient chatter of the room like a knife through soft butter. The table went silent. 14 pairs of eyes swung toward me. "I know. Mom, I'm so sorry," I stammered, walking closer to the table, looking for a chair. There was one empty seat near the end, squeezed between a radiator and the service door. Work was a disaster. There was a crisis with a shipment, and I couldn't leave until I fixed it. I got here as fast as I could. I reached the empty chair and looked at the table setting. It was bare, no silverware, no water glass, just the white cloth. "Well," Elaine said, picking up her coffee cup and taking a delicate sip, "we couldn't very well starve waiting for you. We decided to move dinner up to 5 o'clock. I blinked, confused. 5? The invitation said 6:30. "I sent a text," she said breezily, waving a hand as if dismissing a fly. "Or I thought I said something when we spoke on Tuesday. You really should pay better attention to family details. Daniela, it is not our fault you are always so buried in that job of yours." I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. I checked my phone obsessively. I knew every text message in my history. She had never changed the time. She had never said 5 o'clock. If she had, I would have told her I couldn't make it. I would have told her I didn't get off work until 6. "Mom, you didn't tell me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "If I had known it was at 5, I would have told you I couldn't be here." Always excuses. My father, Richard, muttered. He didn't even look at me. He was busy swirling the last of his cognac, looking bored. He looked healthy, robust. His skin tanned from the golf trips he took using the retirement allowance I supplemented every month. "We are celebrating 32 years. Daniela, you could have made an effort." "I did make an effort," I insisted, the injustice of it starting to burn in my chest. "I drove through a storm to get here." "And yet, you missed the toasts," Elaine said, shaking her head with exaggerated disappointment. "And the cake, it was a beautiful cake. Miles made a lovely speech." At the mention of his name, my younger brother Miles leaned back in his chair. He was 27 years old, wearing a suit that fit him perfectly and a smirk that fit him even better. He held a glass of champagne, looking at me with eyes that shone with amusement. "Yeah, Danny," Miles drawled. "I talked about family sacrifice. You probably wouldn't have understood it anyway." A few cousins giggled. I looked around the table, searching for an ally. My Aunt Sarah looked down at her lap. Uncle Jerry pretended to be fascinated by the ceiling. Nobody spoke. Nobody said, "Hey, give her a break. She's working hard." Nobody said, "Here, sit down. Let's order you something." I was still standing. My legs felt heavy. "Okay," I said, trying to salvage the night. "I'm sorry I missed it. I really am. Can I order a glass of wine? Maybe some soup?" Elaine sighed, a long, tragic sound that suggested my request was an immense burden. "The kitchen is closing for private events, Daniela, and honestly, we are all ready to go. It has been a long evening for us." She reached for a black leather folder sitting next to her elbow. The bill. "However," Elaine said, her voice sharpening, losing its tragic edge and gaining a businesslike tone I knew too well, "since you are finally here, we can settle up." She slid the black folder across the white tablecloth. It spun smoothly, passing the empty dessert plates, passing the crystal glasses, until it came to a stop right at the edge of the table, directly in front of my hip. I looked at the folder, then at her. "What is this?" "The bill, obviously," Elaine said. "I didn't eat," I said, my brow furrowing. "I just got here. Why are you giving this to me?" Elaine tilted her head, giving me a look of pitying patience, as if explaining simple addition to a toddler. "Daniela, look at the situation. You missed the dinner. You missed the celebration. We are all disappointed. The least you can do, logically, is handle the check. Since you didn't participate in the meal, nobody is asking you to pay for your own food. But it is only right that you treat the family. It is a gesture, to show you care, to show you actually wanted to be here. The logic was so twisted, so perfectly circular in its toxicity, that I felt dizzy, because I missed the party. My punishment was to pay for the party. Miles chuckled, the sound wet and ugly. "Perfect timing, really," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You arrived right when the bill did. Talk about efficiency. The Webb family ATM just checked in." Laughter rippled through the room. It wasn't raucous laughter. It was worse. It was the polite, agreeing titter of people who were relieved they weren't the target. It was the laughter of people who were happy to eat a free meal and didn't care whose blood paid for it. I looked at Miles. He was wearing a watch I had bought him for his birthday. I looked at my mother. She was wearing earrings I had paid for when she claimed she lost her old ones. I looked at my father. He was just looking at the door, waiting to leave. I opened the leather folder. I looked at the number at the bottom. The receipt was long, trailing down past the leather edge. Appetizers, filet mignon, lobster thermidor, bottles of Cabernet, vintage champagne, desserts, coffees, cognacs. The total was $1,987.50. Almost $2,000. $2,000 for a dinner where I wasn't even offered a chair. My hands started to shake, not from the cold rain, and not from the stress of the lost container. They shook from a sudden, violent clarity. "You want me to pay $2,000? I said, my voice low. "It is for your parents' anniversary," Aunt Sarah piped up from the corner, her voice righteous. "It is a milestone. Daniela, you make good money at that shipping company. Don't be stingy." "I didn't eat a single bite," I said, looking at Sarah. "It's the principle," Elaine said, checking her reflection in a spoon. "It's about support. If you loved us, the money wouldn't matter. You know, Miles offered to pay, but we know he is saving for his startup. You are the one with the stable income. It is just appropriate." Miles had not offered to pay. I knew that with the certainty of gravity, Miles had never paid for a meal in his life. I looked at the bill again. $1,987. That was my rent. That was 3 months of my student loan payments. That was 100 hours of overtime dealing with screaming dispatchers. Something inside my chest, something that had been pulled taut for years, suddenly snapped. It didn't make a sound, but I felt the vibration of it in my teeth. I looked at my father. "Dad?" I asked. "You agree with this?" Richard shrugged, a small movement of his shoulders that screamed indifference. "Your mother thinks it is fair. Daniela, don't cause a scene. Just take care of it so we can go home. Just take care of it." That was my epitaph. Here lies Daniela. She took care of it. I looked down at the receipt. The paper felt thin and cheap between my fingers. "No," I whispered. "Excuse me?" Elaine's eyes narrowed. "No," I said, louder this time. I picked up the receipt. I lifted it out of the folder. "Daniela, put that card down and pay the bill," Elaine hissed, her social mask slipping to reveal the predator underneath. "You are embarrassing us." "I am embarrassing you?" I asked. The calmness in my voice scared me. "I drove through a storm to be here. I walked into a room where my own family ate without me. You lied about the time. You mocked me. And now you want me to pay $2,000 for the privilege of being treated like a servant?" I took the long strip of paper in both hands. "I am not an ATM," I said, looking directly at Miles, "and I am not paying for this." I ripped the receipt in half. The sound was sharp, a dry crackle in the silent room. Elaine gasped. Miles's jaw dropped. I put the two halves together and ripped them again, and again. I tore the bill into confetti. I let the pieces flutter down from my hands. They landed softly on the white tablecloth, settling over the dirty plates and the empty wine glasses like snow. "Happy anniversary," I said. I turned around. "Daniela!" Elaine shrieked, her voice rising an octave. "You come back here! You pick this up! You fix this right now!" "She's lost it," I heard Miles mutter. "She's actually crazy." "Ungrateful," another voice hissed. "After everything they did for her." "Someone needs to teach that girl her position," Uncle Jerry grumbled. I didn't stop. I walked out of the private room. I walked through the main dining room, past the happy couples eating their pasta, past the host stand where the maitre d' looked at me with concern. I pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped back out into the night. The rain was still pouring, icy and relentless. It soaked through my blazer in seconds, plastering my hair to my skull. I walked to my car, my heels splashing in puddles, water running down my neck. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, thudding rhythm. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the door. But as I sat in the driver's seat, staring out at the blurred lights of the parking lot, I realized something strange. Usually, after a fight with my mother, I felt a crushing weight of guilt. I would feel sick. I would feel like a bad daughter. I would already be drafting the apology text. I would be calculating how much money to send to buy back their affection. Tonight, sitting in the dark, shivering from the cold, I waited for the guilt to come. I waited for the shame. But it didn't come. For the first time in 30 years, I started the engine, put the car in reverse, and drove away without looking back. And the only thing I felt was the stunning, terrifying lightness of being done. The drive back to my apartment in Maple Ridge took 30 minutes, but I do not remember a single turn. My body was operating on autopilot, guiding the car through the rain-slicked streets of Riverton, while my mind remained stuck in that frozen, silent moment in the restaurant parking lot. When I finally walked into my unit, the air inside felt stale and cold. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom walk-up that I had chosen specifically for its low rent, telling myself I needed to be frugal to save for the future. I stripped off my soaked blazer and tossed it onto the floor. I was shivering, but the chill had nothing to do with the weather. It was a bone-deep cold that radiated from the center of my chest, a hollow ache where my sense of familial duty used to be. I tried to lie down on the sofa, tried to close my eyes and force myself into sleep, but my brain was vibrating with a frantic, buzzing energy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the smirk on my brother Miles's face. I saw the indifference in my father's shrug. I heard my mother's voice calling me an ATM. I could not sleep. I needed to see it. I needed to see the damage in black and white. I got up and walked to the second-hand filing cabinet I kept in the corner of my living room. The bottom drawer stuck, as it always did, requiring a sharp kick to open. I pulled out a thick, overstuffed manila folder. On the tab, written in my own neat, cramping handwriting, were the words, "Webb Family Relief." I had named it that 2 years ago as a joke, a bit of dark humor to cope with the constant requests for loans and bailouts. But as I carried the heavy folder to my kitchen table and dumped the contents out, there was nothing funny about the pile of paper that slid across the cheap laminate surface. It started as a way to track my budget. I was an organized person. I worked in logistics. After all, I needed to know where my money was going. But over time, this folder had morphed into something else. It had become my reality check. It was the only evidence I had against the gaslighting. Whenever my mother told me I was selfish, or my father claimed I never helped out, I would come home and look at these papers just to remind myself that I was not crazy. I began to spread them out, covering the entire surface of the table. There was the receipt for the emergency roof repair on their house in Brookhaven Ridge from last October, $4,500. My mother had called me weeping, saying water was pouring into the master bedroom. I paid the contractor directly. 2 weeks later, I found out the leak was minor, but they had decided to redo the entire shingle layout while the crew was there. Next to it lay the invoice for my father's dental implants, $6,000. He had claimed his insurance wouldn't cover the anesthesia or the porcelain upgrade. I paid it because he said he was in pain. I later learned he had used the remaining insurance payout to buy a new set of custom golf clubs. Then there was the down payment for Miles's car, $3,000. He had sworn he needed it to get to job interviews. He had promised to pay me back within 6 months. That was 2 years ago. Not only had he not paid me back, but I also found 3 separate receipts for his car insurance premiums that had auto-drafted from my account because he had put my card on file as a backup and then forgot to fund his own account. I moved around the table, arranging the papers chronologically, building a timeline of exploitation. Here was the electric bill from last winter, when they ran the heating at 75 degrees with the windows open. Here was the veterinary bill for the purebred golden retriever puppy they bought on impulse and then gave away 3 months later because it chewed the furniture. Here was the $500 I transferred to my aunt because my mother said she was about to be evicted, only to see photos of them all at a casino the following weekend. My hands were shaking as I picked up a piece of paper I had almost forgotten about. It was a credit card statement from 8 months ago. I stared at the line item, highlighted in yellow. It was a charge for the Desert Sun Springs Resort in New Sedona. 4 nights, 2 luxury suites, plus charges for the spa, the steakhouse, and the poolside bar. The total for that one weekend was $4,200. I remembered that weekend vividly. It was the second week of August. I was covering a shift for a sick colleague, working 14 hours a day dealing with a customs strike at the border. I had been so exhausted I was hallucinating. I remembered getting a text from my mother that said they were going on a small getaway to recharge. She had asked if she could use my card for the incidentals deposit, promising they would put their own card down for the room charge upon checkout. They never switched the cards. I looked at the date on the statement, August 12th, while I was eating vending machine crackers for dinner at my desk, trying to keep freight moving. My family was ordering Wagyu beef sliders and craft cocktails in a cabana, charging it all to me, and they had never even said thank you. They had never even mentioned it, other than to complain later that the service at the hotel was a bit slow. I felt a wave of dizziness so strong I had to grip the edge of the table. This was not helping. This was robbery. I grabbed a notebook and a calculator. I needed the number. I needed to know exactly how much my love for them had cost. I started punching in the numbers. The clicking of the calculator keys sounded like gunshots in the quiet apartment. Roof repair, $4,500. Dental work, $6,000. Miles's car, $3,000. The Sedona trip, $4,200. The recurring phone family plan I paid for, $240 a month for 3 years. That was $8,640. The car insurance, the groceries, the loans for rent gaps, the Christmas gifts that had to be expensive or else I was cheap. I added it up once. The number on the small gray screen seemed impossible. I cleared it and started over, my fingers moving slower this time, double-checking every decimal point, hoping I had made a mistake, hoping I had accidentally added a 0 somewhere. I did the math a third time. The number remained the same. I sat back in my chair, staring at the total, $53,415.82. In just the last 3 years, $53,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a master's degree. That was the travel fund I had been dreaming about since I was 20. That was my freedom. And it was gone, eaten by people who had looked at me tonight and laughed because I wouldn't pay another $2,000. The nausea hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I scrambled up from the chair, knocking it over, and ran to the bathroom. I barely made it to the sink before I dry heaved, my stomach cramping violently. There was nothing in my system to bring up, just bile and bitterness. I gripped the cold porcelain of the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes red-rimmed and hollow. I wasn't sick because of the money. Money, technically, could be earned back. I was sick because of the realization that washed over me, cold and undeniable. This was not a series of unfortunate events. This was not a family down on their luck needing a helping hand. This was a system. They had built a machine to extract resources from me, and they had calibrated it perfectly. They knew exactly which buttons to push. Guilt, duty, shame, to keep the currency flowing. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource, a natural resource to be mined until it was depleted. I turned on the faucet and splashed freezing water on my face. The shock of the cold helped clear the fog in my brain. I stood up straight and wiped my face with a towel. "No more," I said to the empty bathroom. My voice was raspy. but it was steady. I walked back out to the kitchen, stepped over the fallen chair, and sat down in front of my laptop. I opened the lid and logged into my bank account. The first thing I did was go to the Scheduled Transfers tab. There was a recurring transfer set for the first of every month, $500 to my mother's checking account. I clicked Cancel. A pop-up asked me if I was sure. I clicked Yes. Next, I went to the credit card portal. I pulled up the rewards card I had had since college. I navigated to the Authorized Users section. There was Miles's name. I hovered over the trash can icon next to it. For a second, a phantom voice in my head whispered, "He's going to be stranded if he has an emergency." Then I remembered the smirk. The Webb family ATM just checked in. I clicked Remove. I went through every single financial instrument I owned. I changed the passwords to everything. I enabled two-factor authentication on accounts that I didn't even know had the feature. I removed my card details from the shared Amazon Prime account. I removed my card from the Uber Eats family profile. I was systematically closing the valves. I was boarding up the windows. Finally, I picked up my phone. It was sitting on the table, silent for now, but I knew the storm that would come in the morning when the notifications started hitting their devices, when the card was declined at the gas station, when the transfer didn't arrive. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Mom. My thumb hovered over the name. Blocking a parent felt like a cardinal sin. It felt like violating a law of nature. But then I looked at the pile of receipts on the table. That pile was a monument to 30 years of me trying to buy love that they were not capable of selling. I tapped the information icon. I scrolled down to the bottom in red text. Block this caller. I tapped it. I did the same for Richard. I did the same for Miles. Then I went through the list of aunts and cousins who only ever called when they needed a small favor. Block, block, block. It took me 10 minutes to sever the digital ties that bound me to my entire biological history. When I was done, I set the phone down on the table, face down. I expected to feel panic. I expected to feel the crushing weight of isolation. Instead, as I sat there in my small, quiet apartment, listening to the rain tap against the window, I felt a strange sensation in my lungs. I took a deep breath, and the air went all the way down. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of 4 other adults on my back. I was alone, and for the first time, being alone didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like safety. I gathered the papers into a pile, not bothering to organize them this time, and shoved them back into the Webb Family Relief folder. I threw the folder back into the filing cabinet and kicked the drawer shut. I turned off the kitchen light and walked into my bedroom. I was exhausted, but the frantic buzzing in my brain had stopped. It had been replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I didn't know how loud they would scream when they realized the Bank of Daniela was closed for business. But as I pulled the duvet up to my chin, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't paying for the anniversary dinner, and I wasn't paying for anything else ever again. I woke up the next morning not to the sound of my alarm, but to the relentless vibration of my phone on the nightstand. It was buzzing against the wood like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. My head felt heavy, a dull throb behind my eyes that had nothing to do with alcohol and everything to do with the emotional hangover of severing ties with my entire biological family. I rolled over and squinted at the screen. It was 7:15 in the morning. Usually, at this hour, my notifications were a mix of work emails from Iron Line Nexus Freightworks and perhaps a few newsletters I never read. Today, the screen was a wall of red bubbles. Instagram, Facebook, text messages from people I had not spoken to since high school, direct messages from my mother's friends. I sat up, the duvet falling to my waist, and picked up the device. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned with a familiar dread. I had blocked my parents and Miles, so I knew this deluge was not coming directly from them. This was the fallout. This was the blast wave. I opened a text from an old college friend. Sarah. It was just a screenshot, accompanied by 3 question marks. The screenshot was of a Facebook post made by my cousin, Jessica. Jessica lived 3 states away and hadn't seen me in 4 years. Yet there she was, posting a long, heartfelt status update, asking for prayers for our family today. The post began, "My heart is breaking for my Aunt Elaine and Uncle Richard. It is so hard to watch someone you love struggle with their mental health. We are doing everything we can to support my cousin Daniela during this breakdown, but she is pushing everyone away. Please respect our privacy as we try to get her the professional help she desperately needs. Mental health is real. Guys, check on your strong friends." I stared at the words, breakdown, professional help. I switched to Instagram. There was a story posted by my Aunt Sarah, the one who had told me not to be stingy at the restaurant. It was a picture of my parents looking somber, holding hands at a table that I recognized as their kitchen. The caption read, "Even on their anniversary, they are worrying about their children. A mother's love is unconditional. Even when it is rejected, we are all praying for Daniela to find peace and clarity. Stress is a silent killer." I scrolled further. There were comments, dozens of them. "Oh no. Is she okay? I saw her last week and she looked fine. Work stress can make people snap. Sending love. I hope she doesn't hurt herself or anyone else. Let me know if you need a recommendation for a therapist. Elaine, so brave of you to share this." I felt the air leave the room. They were not just complaining about me, they were rewriting reality. I sat on the edge of my bed, my feet touching the cold floorboards, and scrolled through post after post. It was a coordinated assault. It was impressive, in a terrified sort of way. Less than 12 hours had passed since I walked out of the Copper Lantern Bistro, and they had already drafted, polished, and distributed a press release. The narrative was consistent across every branch of the family tree. Daniela didn't leave because she was tired of being financially abused. Daniela didn't leave because she was insulted. No, Daniela left because she was having a psychotic break. Daniela was overworked. Daniela was unstable. Daniela was acting erratic and manic. They had taken my one moment of clarity, the moment I set a boundary, and twisted it into a symptom of pathology. I opened a message from a woman named Brenda, one of my mother's bridge club friends. "Daniela, honey, your mom is frantic. She says you blocked her number. She is just worried you might do something rash. Please call her. We all love you." I laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. Worried I might do something rash? No. They were worried I wouldn't pay the credit card bill. The genius of their strategy was sickening. By painting me as mentally unstable, they achieved two things instantly. First, they garnered sympathy. They became the long-suffering, saintly parents trying to save their wayward, sick daughter. Second, and far more insidious, they discredited anything I might say in the future. If I told people they stole $53,000 from me, well, that was just paranoia. That was just the stress talking. Poor Daniela. She thinks her parents are robbing her. She really needs medication. I stood up and paced the small length of my bedroom. The anger that flared in my chest was different from the night before. Last night was hot. Reactive anger. This was cold. This was the anger of someone realizing they are at war. I looked at the timestamps on the posts. The first one went up at 8:30 in the evening. That was barely 40 minutes after I left the restaurant. They hadn't spent the evening reflecting on why I was upset. They hadn't spent the evening feeling guilty. They had spent the evening workshopping a story that would cover their tracks. I thought about the attempts to reach me. According to Cousin Jessica's post, they were trying to get me help. According to Aunt Sarah, they were reaching out. I checked my phone logs again. I had blocked my immediate family. Yes, but I hadn't blocked everyone. There were no missed calls from uncles, no text messages from cousins asking, "Hey, what actually happened?" No emails from my father's personal account, which I knew he barely knew how to use but could have tried if he was truly desperate. There was zero attempt at actual communication. There was only public performance. If they were truly worried I was having a mental breakdown, they would have come to my apartment. They knew where I lived. They would have called the police to do a wellness check. They would have been banging on my door. But my door was silent. The hallway was empty. They didn't want to find me. They wanted to isolate me. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My instinct, my human, wounded instinct, was to go online and scream. I wanted to comment on Jessica's post. I wanted to post a picture of the Webb family relief receipts and caption it. Is this what a breakdown looks like? Or is this what a bank robbery looks like? I typed out a status update. My family is lying. I am not sick. I cut them off because they stole over $50,000 from me. My finger hovered over the post button. Then I stopped. I thought about what Milo, a friend from college who worked in risk management, had once told me. When you are in a hole, stop digging. When you are in a trap, stop wiggling. If I posted that, I would look exactly like the person they were describing. I would look defensive. I would look angry. I would look manic. They had baited the hook, and they were waiting for me to bite. If I engaged, I validated their narrative that there was a drama. I deleted the text. Instead, I took a screenshot of Jessica's post. I took a screenshot of Aunt Sarah's Instagram story. I took screenshots of the comments from my mother's friends. I created a new folder on my desktop. I placed it right next to the digital backup of the financial records. I named it Narrative Control. I dragged every single image into that folder. I documented the timestamps. I documented who said what. I was not a participant in this drama anymore. I was an archivist. I went to my social media privacy settings. I didn't deactivate my accounts. That would look like a retreat, or worse, a confirmation that I was hiding. Instead, I changed my settings so that no one could tag me in posts without my approval. I restricted who could comment on my page. I muted the accounts of every single family member and mutual friend who had engaged with their lies. I silenced the noise, but I kept the evidence. As I worked, a realization began to crystallize in my mind, sharper and more terrifying than the financial realization of the night before. The dinner last night wasn't just a rude event, it was a trigger. I had cut off the money. I had stopped the flow of resources in any biological system. When a parasite loses its host, it reacts violently. It tries to reattach. If it cannot reattach, it tries to destroy the host to prevent it from benefiting anyone else. My family was not reacting to a missed dinner. They were reacting to a loss of supply. They knew, deep down, that without my funding, their lifestyle was unsustainable. Miles's startup dreams, my father's golf club memberships, my mother's image of upper-middle-class perfection. It was all built on a foundation of my salary and my credit score. By walking away, I had pulled the pin on a grenade that was sitting in their living room. The mental breakdown story was their insurance policy. It explained away the sudden change in their lifestyle that was inevitably coming. Oh, we can't go to Sedona this year because we are focusing our resources on Daniela's treatment. We had to sell the second car to help pay for Daniela's therapy. It was brilliant. It was evil. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Maple Ridge gray and washed out. I watched a neighbor walking a dog, a mundane scene of normalcy that felt a million miles away from my life. I had always known my family was selfish. I had known they were greedy, but I had always believed that, in some twisted, broken way, they loved me. I thought they saw me as a person, a useful person, perhaps, but still a person. But you don't do this to a person you love. You don't publicly destroy the reputation of someone you love just to save face. You do this to an enemy. And that was the thought that made my blood run cold. If they were willing to do this, if they were willing to paint me as insane on a public platform where my colleagues, my boss, and my future could see it, what were they doing in the shadows? If they felt entitled to my reputation, what else did they feel entitled to? I thought about the folder of receipts. I thought about the credit card they used for the resort. I thought about the times my mother had asked for my social security number for insurance paperwork when I was in college. I thought about the times Miles had borrowed my laptop. I had assumed the abuse was limited to what I could see. I had assumed the $2,000 bill was the ceiling of their audacity. But looking at the screen captures in my narrative control folder, looking at the ease with which they lied, I realized that the bill was not the ceiling, it was the floor. I turned away from the window. The apartment was quiet, but the silence didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like the silence before a second storm. I needed to check everything, not just the bank accounts I knew about. I needed to check the ones I didn't know about. I picked up my phone, bypassing the wall of notifications, and dialed the number for the credit bureau. My hand was trembling again, not from sadness this time, but from a gut-wrenching suspicion that the story my family was telling about me was merely a distraction from the story they were writing with my name. If they are willing to kill me socially, I whispered to the empty room, they have probably already tried to kill me financially. I waited for the automated voice on the other end of the line, preparing myself to ask the questions that no daughter should ever have to ask about the people who gave her life. The public smear campaign was painful, yes, but as the hold music played, I had a sinking feeling that the public lies were just the smoke. The fire was burning somewhere else, consuming things I didn't even know I owned. 3 days after the anniversary dinner, there was a sharp, authoritative knock on my door. It was not the frantic pounding of a family member trying to stage an intervention, nor was it the polite tap of a neighbor. It was a rhythmic, 3-beat knock that sounded like a judge's gavel. I looked through the peephole and exhaled for the first time that morning. It was Milo Reyes. Milo and I had gone to university together, bonding over cheap coffee and late-night cram sessions for our microeconomics finals. While I had gone into the high-speed chaos of logistics, Milo had taken his obsessive attention to detail into the insurance industry. He was now a senior internal investigations coordinator for a major national insurer. His job, as he liked to describe it, was to look at a pile of accidents and figure out which ones were actually staged dramas. I opened the door. Milo stood there shaking a wet umbrella, holding a plastic bag emanating the smell of spicy pad thai in one hand and a thick hardcover book in the other. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a pitying look or a hug. He just walked past me, kicked off his shoes, and set the food on my small kitchen table. "I saw the Facebook posts," Milo said, his voice level. He placed the book down next to the takeout. I glanced at the cover. Adult children of emotionally immature parents. "I know your family has always been a little theatrical, Daniela, but accusing you of having a psychotic break because you missed appetizers seems like an escalation. What happened?" I closed the door and locked it. Milo was the only person in my life who knew the vague outlines of my family situation, but even he didn't know the density of it. He knew they borrowed money. He didn't know they inhaled it. We sat down. I opened a container of noodles, the steam rising between us, and I told him everything. I started with the crisis at Iron Line Nexus Freight Works, the drive in the rain, the empty table at the Copper Lantern Bistro. I told him about the time change lie. I told him about the smirk on Miles's face when he called me an ATM. I told him about the bill, $1,987, and the sound the paper made when I tore it apart. Milo listened with the intensity of a predator tracking movement. He didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp. He just ate his food, his dark eyes moving from my face to his hands, processing, categorizing. When I got to the part about the social media smear campaign, he stopped chewing and set his fork down. "And the financial records?" he asked. "You mentioned a folder." "The Webb Family Relief Fund," I said, pointing to the filing cabinet. "Get it," he said. I retrieved the folder, which was now messy and disorganized from my late-night audit. I placed it on the table. Milo didn't just look at it, he annexed it. He pushed the food containers aside and began to spread the receipts and statements out across the laminate surface. He moved with the precision of a surgeon. He separated the papers into piles, credit card statements in one row, direct transfer receipts in another, cash withdrawal slips in a third. He took a pen from his pocket and started circling dates and locations. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the apartment was the scratching of his pen and the rustle of paper. I watched him, feeling a strange mix of shame and vindication. It felt like I was showing a doctor a festering wound I had been hiding under long sleeves. Finally, Milo leaned back, He took off his wire-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked at me, the warmth of friendship was gone from his eyes, replaced by the cold, hard glint of professional assessment. "Daniela," he said, "you need to stop thinking about this as a family dispute. This isn't a dispute. This is a business model." "I know," I said, my voice small. "I know they use me." "No," Milo cut in, sharp and sudden. "You don't know. You think you are the outsider. You think you are the black sheep they keep around to shearing whenever they get cold. That is what you tell yourself to make sense of the cruelty." He reached out and tapped the center of the table, where the piles of paper converged. "You are not the outsider. Daniela, you are the pillar. You are the structural integrity of the entire Webb family architecture. Without this folder, without your compliance, they do not exist, not in the way they think they do." He picked up a credit card statement from 2 years ago. "Look at this," he said. I leaned in. It was a charge for $300 at a high-end electronics store called Circuit City Limits. "It's just a gadget Miles probably bought," I said. "He loves tech." "Look at the date," Milo commanded. I looked. November 14th. "Okay," I said. "November 14th, Milo recited from memory, tapping his temple. "That was the week you were in Chicago for the logistics conference. You posted photos. I remember because I commented on the deep dish pizza." He pulled another sheet of paper, a receipt for a car rental in Riverton on the same day. "This card was physically swiped at the electronics store in Riverton," Milo said, "at 3 p.m, while you were sitting in a seminar in Chicago." I stared at the paper. "But I have the card. I always have the card." "Which means they made a clone," Milo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or more likely, they requested a replacement card be sent to their address while you were traveling, activated it, used it, and then destroyed it before you got back. Or maybe they just kept it." He flipped to another page. "Here, July 4th weekend last year. You were at the company picnic. I saw you there. This charge is for a VIP table at a club in downtown Denver. $500. He pulled a third sheet. "Here, a transaction for educational materials that is actually a shell company often used by online gambling sites to mask charges. $1,200. Billed to your emergency credit line." Milo lined the 3 papers up in front of me. "These aren't requests for help. Daniela, these aren't borrowing. This is embezzlement. If I saw this pattern at my job, I wouldn't call a family therapist. I would call the police." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had looked at the totals. Yes, I had seen the $53,000 figure, but I had looked at it as a sum of my own stupidity, my own inability to say no. I hadn't looked at the line items. I hadn't realized that for every time I said yes, there were 3 times they hadn't even bothered to ask. "They are stealing from me," I whispered. It sounded different when I said it out loud. Heavier. "They are harvesting you," Milo corrected. "And the reason they are launching this smear campaign, the reason they are calling you crazy, is because the harvest stopped. They are terrified. If the bank closes, they default on their lives." He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where the gray sedan was parked, though we didn't know whose it was yet. "We need to secure the perimeter," Milo said, turning back to me. "Right now, tonight." He pulled a notepad from his pocket and started writing a list. "1, he said. "You open a new bank account at a completely different institution. Not a different branch, a different bank. One where your parents have never banked. Do not use your mother's maiden name as a security question. Do not use your high school mascot. Use fake answers. If they ask for your mother's maiden name, write Godzilla. 2, he continued, scribbling furiously. You freeze your credit files at all 3 bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, lock them down so tight, air can't get in. 3, 2-factor authentication on everything, email, social media, bank apps, and do not use SMS text messages for the codes, because SIM swapping is easy if someone knows your carrier info, which Miles definitely does. Use an authenticator app. He tore the sheet off and handed it to me. "And 4," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "You do not talk to them. You do not explain. You do not justify." "I blocked them," I said. "Good," Milo said. "Keep them blocked. But more importantly, do not go over there. Do not go to Brookhaven Ridge to talk it out. When a system like this is threatened, it doesn't negotiate. It attacks. They are already assassinating your character online. If you go there in person, they will try to break you. They will cry. They will scream. They might even threaten self-harm. It is called an extinction burst. When a behavior no longer yields the reward, the subject ramps up the behavior to maximum intensity before they give up." He started packing up his things. The food was cold, untouched except for the first few bites. "What do I do if they come here?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. "You don't open the door," Milo said. "You call the police. You treat them exactly like you would treat a stranger trying to break into your house, because that is what they are right now. Strangers who know your passwords." He walked to the door and put his shoes back on. Before he opened it, he turned to me one last time. "You are going to feel guilty, Daniela. You are going to look at that folder and wonder if you are overreacting. You are going to think, but they are my family. When you feel that, I want you to look at the charge for the VIP club in Denver. I want you to remember that while you were sweating at a company picnic trying to network for a promotion to pay their bills, they were popping bottles on your dime." He opened the door. The hallway was empty. "We are going to find more," he warned. "This folder is just what you caught. If I know people like this, and unfortunately I do, there is an iceberg underneath this. Be ready." "Thank you, Milo," I said. "Don't thank me yet," he said grimly. "Just change your passwords and watch the system shake." He closed the door, and the sound of the latch clicking into place felt final. I looked at the table, covered in the forensic evidence of my own exploitation. Milo was right. I wasn't an ATM. An ATM has limits. An ATM charges fees. I was something far worse. I was the fuel. And for the first time in 32 years, the tank was empty. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I opened a search tab for a new bank. I typed in the URL. "Mother's maiden name?" the security question asked. I typed, "Godzilla." And for the first time in days, I smiled. It was a small, vicious smile, but it was mine. The air in the Cloud Ridge distribution center smelled of diesel fumes, ozone, and damp cardboard. It was a week after I had walked out of the Copper Lantern Bistro, and I had thrown myself into my work at Iron Line Nexus Freightworks with a fervor that bordered on religious. If I kept moving, if I kept solving problems for other people, I did not have to think about the silence on my phone or the folder of receipts sitting on my kitchen table. I was standing on the loading dock, wearing a high-visibility vest and holding a digital scanner, verifying a shipment of automotive parts bound for Japan. The rhythmic beep-beep-beep of forklifts backing up was the soundtrack to my afternoon. My personal phone buzzed in my back pocket. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another flying monkey from my family, perhaps a cousin I hadn't blocked yet, or a concerned neighbor sent by my mother to fish for information. But the buzzing persisted. It stopped, then started again immediately. I pulled the phone out, annoyed. The screen displayed a number I did not recognize, with a generic caller ID, Financial Services. I stepped away from the noise of the loading dock, finding a quiet corner near the break room vending machines. "This is Daniela," I answered, my voice sharp. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Daniela Webb?" The voice on the other end was male, professional, and clipped. It sounded like a man who spent his day delivering bad news. "Speaking." "Ms. Webb, my name is Arthur Pendleton. I am calling from the Fraud Prevention Department at Monument Federal Bank. We are calling to verify some unusual activity on your account ending in 4492. I frowned, leaning against the cinder block wall. "I think you have the wrong number. I don't bank with Monument Federal." There was a pause on the line. The clicking of a keyboard was audible in the background. "You are Daniela Webb? Date of birth, March 12th, 1992? Yes, I said, a small knot forming in my stomach. But I bank with Chase and Wells Fargo. I have never opened an account with Monument. I see, Arthur said. His tone shifted. It became less like a customer service agent and more like an investigator. Ms. Webb, we are looking at an Obsidian Elite credit card account opened under your name and social security number approximately 2 months ago. Are you stating you did not authorize this account? Obsidian Elite? I repeated the words. They sounded heavy, expensive. I had seen ads for those cards in airport lounges. Black metal cards meant for high rollers. People who flew first class and stayed in 5-star hotels. No, absolutely not. I have never even applied for a card like that. I wouldn't even qualify for one. Well, according to our system, you were approved based on household income and credit history, Arthur said. The reason for my call is that the card has just exceeded its credit limit of $20,000, triggering a manual review. There was an attempted charge for $4,000 at a luxury watch retailer in Denver 20 minutes ago that we declined. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The noise of the warehouse, the forklifts, the shouting men, the clanking chains, faded into a dull roar. Exceeded? I whispered. You mean there is $20,000 of debt on this card? $20,415.12, to be precise, Arthur read. The balance has been accumulated rapidly over the last 8 weeks. My hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic case creaked. Read me the address, I commanded. My voice was shaking, but I forced it to be loud. Read me the address on the file. The billing address is listed as 1242 Maple Street, Brookhaven Ridge, Colorado. My parents' house. I closed my eyes. I could see the house, the manicured lawn, the white shutters, the mailbox where this black metal card had arrived, secret and silent, while I was sitting at my desk at Iron Line, working overtime to pay for their roof repairs. And the email? I asked. What email address was used to open the account? One moment, Arthur said. The primary contact email is listed as miles.w.web93@gmail.com. The world stopped. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It wasn't a paranoid theory Milo and I had cooked up over cold noodles. My brother, Miles, my baby brother, the one I had bought school clothes for, the one I had defended when he got caught shoplifting candy as a kid. He had used my name. He had used my social security number. He had applied for a credit card that cost $500 a year just to own, and he had maxed it out in 60 days. Ms. Webb, are you still there? I'm here, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Cold, distant, like it was coming from a radio in another room. That is not my email. That is my brother's email. I did not open that card. I did not authorize any of those charges. This is fraud. I understand, Arthur said. We will need to open a formal investigation. I will go ahead and freeze the account immediately so no further charges can be made. However, because the card was sent to an address associated with your credit history, and the payments, well, actually, only minimum payments were made, came from a checking account that also bears the name Webb. Stop, I cut him off. I want everything. I want the IP address of the computer used to submit the application. I want a digital copy of the signature on the electronic contract. I want the full transaction history sent to my work email, not the email on file, my work email. I gave him my Iron Line address. I can send the transaction history now, Arthur said. The IP data and signature verification will take a few days to retrieve from the archives. Send it, I said. And Arthur, do not call the number on that file. Do not email that Gmail address. If you notify them that I know, you are compromising a criminal investigation. Understood. Ms. Webb, I am marking this file as identity theft familial. It is, unfortunately, common. I hung up the phone. I didn't go back to the loading dock. I walked out the side door of the warehouse, into the gray drizzle of the Cloudridge afternoon. I sat down on a wet concrete step and stared at the chain-link fence. I felt like I wanted to vomit. But the nausea was different this time. It wasn't the sick feeling of being used. It was the terrifying clarity of being hunted. $20,000. In 2 months. They hadn't just been using me. They hadn't just been mooching. While I was sitting at that anniversary dinner, feeling guilty for being late, Miles had a $20,000 debt bomb ticking in his pocket with my name on it. He had sat there, smirked at me, called me an ATM, and drank champagne that he might have very well paid for with this card. They weren't just a toxic family, they were criminals. I unlocked my phone again. My fingers were trembling so badly I had to tap the screen 3 times to find the contact. Milo. He picked up on the first ring. Report, he said. No hello, just business. Monument Federal Bank, I said. Obsidian Elite Card. Limit 20,000. Maxed out. Milo let out a low whistle. 20 large? In how long? 2 months, I said. Opened right around the time I stopped paying for his car insurance directly and told him to handle it. He used his email, miles.w.web. Sloppy, Milo said. Arrogant. He thought you would never find out. Or he thought that if you did, you would just pay it off to avoid a hit to your credit score. That is the leverage. Daniela. They count on your fear of financial ruin being stronger than your anger. He bought a watch, I said, staring at a seagull pecking at a piece of trash. He tried to buy a $4,000 watch today. That's what triggered the fraud alert. Of course he did, Milo said. Liquidity? He buys the watch on credit, sells it at a pawn shop or on eBay for cash. It is a classic bust-out scheme. He was cashing out your credit line before the house of cards collapsed. Milo, I said, my voice cracking. This isn't just borrowing money, it is federal identity theft. Milo finished the sentence for me. His voice was hard, devoid of any softness. It is wire fraud, it is bank fraud, and because he used the mail to receive the card, it is mail fraud. We are talking about felonies. Daniela, real prison time, not a time out in the corner. I leaned my head back against the cold brick wall. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe my parents let him. The card went to their house. Daniela, Milo said, and his tone dropped an octave. You need to stop being surprised. You need to get angry. If they opened this card 2 months ago, do you really think it is the only one? I went silent. This is the tip of the iceberg, Milo continued. If he has your social, and he has your parents' address, which you haven't lived at in years, but is likely still listed on some old databases, he could have taken out payday loans. He could have opened utility accounts. He could have co-signed on a lease. What do I do? I asked. I asked for the IP addresses. Good, Milo said. That proves it wasn't you. But Daniela, listen to me. This changes the game. We aren't just protecting your money anymore. We are preparing a prosecution. Prosecution? The word tasted like ash. You mean, send Miles to jail? I mean, you file a police report, Milo said. You have to. If you don't file a report for identity theft, the bank holds you liable for the $20,000. You can't just tell them it wasn't me and expect them to write it off. You have to prove you're treating it as a crime. If you don't report him, you are agreeing to pay his debt. $20,000, plus the $53,000 I had already calculated. I can't pay $20,000, Milo, I said. I don't have it. Then you have to turn him in, Milo said. There is no third option. It is him or you. He made that choice when he typed your social security number into a browser. Now you have to make yours. I looked at the gray sky. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the text messages calling me unstable. I thought about the narrative control folder. They had called me crazy. They had said I was having a breakdown. And all the while, Miles was wearing a watch bought with my life, checking his email for shipping notifications on things he stole from my future. Okay, I said. I'm doing it. I'm going to wait for the documents from the bank, and then I'm going to burn it down. Don't burn it, Milo corrected. Document it. The bank is sending the history? Yes. Forward it to me the second you get it. I'll run the merchant codes. We will map out exactly where every cent went. By the time we are done, we will know what brand of toothpaste he uses. Milo? Yeah. He's my brother. No, Milo said. He was your brother. Now, he is just a suspect. I hung up the phone. The rain had started to pick up, cold drops hitting my face, mixing with the sweat on my forehead. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked back toward the warehouse door. I had a shipment to verify. I had a job to do. I was a professional. But as I walked back into the noise and the light, I felt a part of my soul harden into something unbreakable. The sister who had driven through the rain to get to dinner was dead. The woman who walked back onto the loading dock was someone else entirely. She was a witness for the prosecution. The drive home from Cloudridge felt different that evening. The sanctuary of my car, usually the one place where I could listen to a podcast and decompress, now felt like a glass cage on wheels. Every time a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, my eyes darted up, checking the distance, checking the make of the car, checking if it turned when I turned. I was exhausted. The revelation about the Obsidian Elite card had drained the last reserves of my adrenaline, leaving behind a cold, shaky fatigue. I just wanted to get into my apartment, double-lock the door, and pour a glass of wine that I probably wouldn't drink. I parked my car in the resident lot, checking the shadows between the street lamps before I stepped out. The walk to the building entrance was only 50 feet, but I walked it with my keys protruding from my fist like a makeshift weapon, a trick I had learned in college and never thought I would have to use against the concept of my own family. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The doors slid open with a heavy mechanical rattle, revealing the long beige hallway. It was empty. The air smelled faintly of someone's burnt popcorn. I walked toward Unit 4B, my footsteps silent on the cheap carpeting. I reached for my keys, ready to slot the deadbolt home and shut out the world. Then I stopped. Lying on the welcome mat, perfectly centered in front of my door, was a white envelope. It wasn't a standard business envelope. It was a square, heavy stock envelope, the kind you buy in packs of 10 at a stationery store for thank you notes or invitations. There was no stamp. There was no return address. There was no name written on the front. It had not been mailed. It had been placed. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart doing a strange, fluttering kick against my ribs. I looked up and down the hallway. Empty. I crouched down and picked it up. The paper felt expensive. I turned it over and slid my finger under the flap, tearing it open right there in the hallway. I didn't want to bring it inside. Inside was my safe zone. I pulled out a single sheet of unlined paper. The message was written in black ballpoint pen. The handwriting scrawled and jagged, as if the person writing it had been rushing or trying to disguise their natural script. But the slant of the letters, the way the Y looped aggressively at the bottom, was nauseatingly familiar. Don't make a big deal out of this. Every family has issues like this. You are blowing it out of proportion. There was no signature. I read it twice. The words weren't a direct threat of violence, but they were violent in their familiarity. It was the specific cadence of my mother, Elaine. It was the exact phrase she had used when I caught my uncle stealing cash from my purse at a Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago. Don't make a big deal out of it. Daniela. My hand crushed the paper into a ball. Who was here? I whispered. I looked up at the corner of my door frame. I had installed a video doorbell 3 months ago, specifically because packages were getting stolen in the building. It was a small, sleek black device with a blue ring of light. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the app. I wanted to see who had dropped the envelope. I wanted to see the timestamp. I wanted to see if it was my mother, or Miles, or someone they had hired. The app opened, but instead of showing me the live feed or the event timeline, the screen was white. In the center of the screen, a cheerful blue button said, "Set up device." I frowned. I tapped the screen. "Welcome to your new doorbell. Let's get you started." My stomach dropped. The device wasn't broken. It had been reset. I looked closely at the physical doorbell on the wall. To factory reset this specific model, you had to use a special pin tool or a paperclip and hold down a tiny button on the side of the unit for 10 seconds. You had to be physically standing there, holding the button, waiting for the light to flash yellow. I checked the device history in the cloud settings. The last recorded footage was from 2 days ago. Then, nothing. Someone had come to my door 48 hours ago. They had stood there for 10 seconds, completely exposed, and performed a hard reset on my security system. They had wiped the memory. They had turned off my eyes. And then, today, they had come back to leave the note. I felt a prickle of sweat break out on the back of my neck. This wasn't just a visit. This was a demonstration. They were telling me that my technological barriers were a joke to them. They were telling me that while I was playing detective with bank statements, they were physically standing on my welcome mat, pressing buttons. I unlocked my door, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. I engaged the deadbolt, the chain, and the handle lock. I leaned my back against the wood, breathing hard, clutching the crumpled note in my left hand. They were here, I said to the empty apartment. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a chair, dragging it over to wedge it under the doorknob. It was an irrational, movie-like gesture, but I didn't care. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window in the living room, looking down at the street through the slats of the blinds. And that was when I noticed the car. It was a gray sedan, a Ford, maybe, or a Toyota, something intentionally nondescript, the kind of car you see 1,000 times a day and never remember. It was parked directly across the street from my building, under the canopy of an oak tree that blocked the streetlight. The engine was off, but the silhouette was there. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. I watched it for an hour. It didn't move. No one got out. No one got in. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor. Maybe it was just a guest. But the next morning, when I walked out to go to Iron Line, the gray sedan was there. And 2 days later, when I came home early to meet Milo for a strategy session, it was there again. It was always parked in a position that offered a direct line of sight to the front entrance of my building. The paranoia began to seep into the groundwater of my life. I started taking different routes to work. I stopped going to my usual grocery store. I felt like I was moving through a world made of glass, where every reflection might hold the face of someone who shared my DNA and wanted to ruin me. On Tuesday, I ran into Mrs. Gable in the lobby. She was an elderly woman who lived in 4C, the kind of neighbor who knew everyone's business because she had nothing else to do. "Oh, Daniela," she chirped, stopping her walker in front of the mailboxes. "I am so glad I caught you." "Hi, Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice light, though my hand was tightening on my purse strap. "I wanted to tell you I am sorry I missed your visitor the other day," she said. I froze. "My visitor?" "Yes, the nice young man," she said. "He was knocking on your door on Saturday afternoon. I poked my head out to see if you were home, but you were out. He asked if I knew when you usually got back from work." "What did he look like?" I asked. The air in the lobby felt suddenly very thin. "Oh, tall, handsome, dark hair. He said he was your cousin." Mrs. Gable smiled. "He didn't leave a name, but he said it was a family emergency. I told him you usually get in around 6:30. My blood ran cold. Miles, or maybe a cousin I hadn't blocked yet, but they had asked for my schedule, and Mrs. Gable, in her innocent, neighborly helpfulness, had given them my itinerary. "Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice trembling, "I don't have a cousin in town, and if anyone asks about me again, anyone at all, please do not tell them when I am home, please." Her smile faltered. Oh, dear, is everything all right?" "No," I said, "it isn't." I walked to the elevator, leaving her confused in the lobby. I pressed the button for the 4th floor, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He asked when you get back. The elevator ride felt like it took a year. When the doors pinged open, I stepped out cautiously. The hallway was long, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. At the far end of the corridor, near the emergency exit stairwell, a figure was standing. It was a person in a dark hoodie, leaning against the wall, looking toward my apartment door. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, the figure jerked to attention. For a split second, we locked eyes across the 20 yards of beige carpet. I couldn't make out the face. It was shadowed by the hood and the poor lighting. But the posture was familiar, the slouch, the way the hands were shoved deep into the pockets. "Hey!" I shouted. It was an instinct, a bark of territorial fear. The figure didn't answer. They turned sharply, pushed open the heavy fire door, and disappeared into the stairwell. I ran toward them. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to catch Miles. Maybe I wanted to scream at him. I reached the stairwell door and shoved it open. I heard the echoing clatter of footsteps pounding down the concrete stairs, fast and chaotic. Thud, 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 thud. I stood at the top of the landing, gripping the railing, listening until the sound faded and the heavy door at the bottom of the stairwell slammed shut. I was alone again. I walked back to my apartment, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I unlocked the door with trembling fingers and locked it behind me. I checked the chair under the knob. I checked the window locks. I sat down on the floor of my living room, away from the windows, hugging my knees to my chest. Was I going crazy? That was the narrative they were spinning, wasn't it? Daniela is unstable. Daniela is paranoid. Maybe it wasn't Miles in the hallway. Maybe it was just a neighbor I didn't recognize. Maybe the gray car was just a car. Maybe the doorbell reset was a technical glitch. I was gaslighting myself. They had trained me so well that I was doing their work for them. Buzz. My phone lit up on the floor beside me. I stared at it. It wasn't a notification from an app. It was a text message. The number was unfamiliar. The area code was from a different state. I picked it up and opened the message. Don't make things worse than they already are. Someone is trying to help you. Just pick up the phone next time. I read the text again. Trying to help you. That word, help? It was the weaponized word of the Webb family. When they borrowed money, they were helping me learn responsibility. When they criticized my career, they were helping me stay humble. When they stole my identity, they were probably telling themselves they were helping manage the family finances. The voice in the text wasn't Miles. It sounded older. It sounded authoritative. It sounded like the voice of someone who believed they owned me. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the narrative control folder. Then I opened the contact info for the unknown number and hit block. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The apartment, my sanctuary, felt like a trap. They knew my schedule. They had bypassed my camera. They had a key to the psychological lock of my mind, and they were turning it, slowly, trying to see if I would break before I sued. But they had made a mistake. The fear was there, yes, but underneath the fear, the anger was crystallizing into something sharper. They were escalating because I was winning. They were lurking in hallways and resetting cameras because they could no longer walk through the front door and demand a check. I looked at the chair wedged under the door handle. "Come back," I whispered to the darkness. "Come back, and I won't just take a picture. I'll call the cops." I stood up and went to the kitchen. I pulled a knife from the block, a large chef's knife, and carried it back to the living room. I set it on the floor next to me. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. And if the family wanted a reunion, they were going to find out that the bank was not only closed, it was fortified. The drive to Brookhaven Ridge felt less like a commute and more like crossing enemy lines. The suburb was a masterpiece of manufactured serenity. The lawns were cut to the precision of a golf course putting green. The white picket fences were blindingly bright under the Colorado sun, and the American flags limp on their poles looked like props on a movie set. It was a neighborhood designed to whisper success and stability. But as I pulled my car up to the curb of my parents' house, all I could hear was the screaming silence of debt and deceit. I did not park in the driveway. I parked on the street, leaving the car running for a moment while I checked my phone. The battery was full. Storage space was ample. I slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans, the camera lens facing out, though it was the microphone I was relying on today. I walked up the driveway. The scene before me was so perfectly staged it made my teeth ache. My father, Richard, was bent over the open hood of his vintage Jaguar, a car he drove maybe 3 times a year but polished weekly. He was wearing pristine coveralls that looked like they had never seen a drop of oil. My mother, Elaine, was by the flower beds, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and snipping at her prize-winning roses with a pair of shears that glinted in the sun. And there, lounging on a patio chair with his feet up on the glass table, was Miles. He was scrolling through his phone, looking for all the world like a young prince holding court in his kingdom. They looked like a commercial for retirement planning. They looked like a family with nothing to hide. I didn't knock. I walked straight through the side gate, the metal latch clanking loudly. Richard's head snapped up from the engine. Elaine froze mid-snip. Miles lowered his phone, squinting at me through his sunglasses. "Daniela?" Elaine said, her voice pitching up into that fake, sugary register she used when neighbors were watching. "We didn't know you were coming by. What a lovely surprise. Are you here to finally apologize?" I didn't answer. I walked past the Jaguar, past the roses, and stopped directly in front of the glass patio table. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick stack of papers, the Monument Federal Bank fraud packet, the IP trace logs, and the transaction history for the Obsidian Elite card. I slammed the file down on the glass table. It made a heavy, flat thwack that caused Miles to jump. "What is this?" Miles asked. Though he didn't look at the papers, he looked at me, and for a second, the arrogance flickered out, replaced by the twitchy fear of a cornered animal. $20,415, I said. My voice was low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "That is the balance on the credit card you opened in my name 2 months ago." Elaine laughed. It was a nervous, twittering sound. "Oh, Daniela, don't be dramatic. A credit card? You probably just forgot you signed up for one. You receive so much junk mail at the apartment, you lose track." "It wasn't sent to my apartment," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Miles. "It was sent here, to 1242 Maple Street, and the email used to register it wasn't mine. It was miles.w.web. Richard wiped his hands on a rag, walking slowly toward us. He didn't look angry yet. He looked bored, as if I were a child complaining about a scraped knee. "Banks make mistakes, Daniela. Their systems are archaic. It is probably a computer glitch. Identity theft is very common. Some hacker probably got your information and used our address because, well, it's a stable address." "A hacker named Miles?" I asked. "A hacker who used the card to buy a watch in Denver 24 hours ago? A hacker who paid the minimum balance from a checking account linked to this house?" I pointed a finger at the transaction list. "Look at it. The timestamps match. The IP addresses match the Wi-Fi router sitting in your living room right now. This isn't a glitch. Dad, this is a felony." Elaine dropped her shears. She walked over, wiping her hands on her apron, her face twisting into a mask of wounded martyrdom. "Felony? How dare you use that word in this house? After everything we have done for you? We are family. Daniela, we share burdens. If Miles needed a little bridge loan to get his business off the ground, and he used a resource that was available—" "My identity is not a resource," I shouted, the control finally cracking. "My credit score is not a community pot for you to dip into." Miles sat up, swinging his legs off the lounger. He looked annoyed now, not sorry, annoyed. "God, you are so uptight. I was going to pay it back. I had a deal closing next week. The liquidity was just tight." "You maxed it out in 8 weeks, I said. "You bought luxury goods. You didn't invest in a business. You went to casinos." "I have expenses," Miles snapped, his face flushing red. "You don't understand networking. You have to spend money to be in the room with the right people. And I was barely keeping up. I hadn't even met the quota for last month yet." The air in the backyard seemed to freeze. I stared at him. "The quota?" Miles stopped. His mouth hung open slightly. He looked at Richard, then at the ground. "What quota?" I asked, stepping closer. "What are you talking about? Miles? Since when does stealing from your sister have a monthly target? Richard stepped between us, his chest puffed out. He misspoke. He meant his sales quota, for his consulting work. He doesn't have a job, I yelled. He doesn't have clients. The only client he has is me. What quota? Dad, is there a spreadsheet? Do you guys sit around at dinner and decide how much you need to extract from me to hit your numbers? Lower your voice, Richard hissed, looking nervously toward the neighbor's fence. You are hysterical. This is exactly why we were worried about your mental state. You are hearing things. You are twisting words. I am not twisting anything, I said. I reached into my pocket, my thumb hovering over the screen. I felt the vibration as I swiped to unlock and tapped the red record button. I left the phone in the pocket, the microphone fabric thin away from the conversation. Let's talk about the camera, I said, shifting the attack. My video doorbell. Who came to my apartment 3 days ago and reset it? Elaine scoffed, picking up her iced tea. Paranoid, completely paranoid. Why would we drive all the way to that awful part of town to touch your doorbell? We have better things to do. A neighbor saw a man, I said, looking at Miles. Tall, dark hair, said he was my cousin, asked for my schedule. I was at the gym. Miles lied. It was a lazy lie. He didn't even try to make eye contact. And the gray sedan? I pressed. The one parked across the street every night? Is that you, Dad? Or did you hire someone? Richard laughed, a harsh barking sound. Oh, listen to yourself. You think you are so important that we are spying on you? You are a logistics coordinator, Daniela. You move boxes. You aren't a secret agent. Nobody is following you. Then explain the note. I pulled the crumpled white paper from my bag, the one I had found on the mat. I smoothed it out on the glass table next to the bank fraud evidence. This is your handwriting. Mom, I know you're wise. Don't make a big deal out of this. That is you. Elaine looked at the note. She didn't deny it. She just pursed her lips. I was trying to comfort you. I left a note because you wouldn't answer the phone. I didn't want to intrude. By resetting my security system? I don't know what you're talking about with the system, Elaine said, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe the battery died. You always buy cheap electronics. The gaslighting was suffocating. It was a physical weight in the air, heavy and humid. They were denying reality while the evidence was sitting right there in front of them. They were looking at the sky and telling me it was green. I am going to the police, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The birds stopped singing. The distant hum of a lawnmower faded away. Richard's face went a shade of purple I had never seen before. The vein in his forehead bulged. You will do no such thing. I have the fraud packet, I said. I have the IP addresses. I have Miles's email on the application. It is already done. The bank is investigating. If I don't file a police report, they hold me liable for the debt. And I'm not paying $20,000 for Miles's watch. You would put your brother in jail? Elaine shrieked, clutching her chest. Over money? Over paper? Over theft, I corrected. Over betrayal. Richard took a step toward me. He was a big man. And for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of physical fear. But I stood my ground. I could feel the phone recording in my pocket. Every word, every threat. You ungrateful little brat, Richard spat. The mask of the benevolent father was gone. The face looking at me was pure, unfiltered resentment. We raised you. We fed you. We gave you everything. You took everything, I shot back. $53,000 in 3 years. Dad, plus this $20,000. That isn't raising me. That is bleeding me. We are a family, Richard roared. The money belongs to the family. It doesn't matter whose name is on the account. It matters to the law, I said coldly. Richard slammed his fist onto the hood of the Jaguar. The law? You want to talk about the law? If you hadn't walked out of that anniversary dinner, if you hadn't humiliated us in front of everyone, we wouldn't be in this position. I froze. What? Richard was breathing hard, his eyes wild. You cut us off. You stopped the transfers. You blocked our calls. What did you expect us to do? We have bills. Daniela, the club membership was due. The mortgage needed a payment. You left us high and dry. So you stole my identity because I missed dinner? I asked, my voice trembling. We did what was necessary to survive your tantrum, Richard yelled. If you had just played your part, if you had just paid the bill and sat down like a good daughter, Miles wouldn't have had to open that card. You forced our hand. You made us do this. There it was. The admission. He didn't say we didn't do it. He said you made us do it. He admitted that the theft was a direct response to my boundary. He admitted that my role in the family was simply to pay, and when I stopped paying, they felt justified in taking. I made you commit a felony? I asked quietly, just to get it on the recording one more time. You made us protect this family's lifestyle, Richard shouted. You are selfish. Daniela, you have always been selfish, hoarding your salary while we struggle. I looked at the Jaguar. I looked at the manicured roses. I looked at Miles's $400 sunglasses. Struggle, I repeated. I reached into my pocket and turned off the recording. I had it. I had the confession. I had the motive. I looked at them one last time. They weren't my parents. They weren't my brother. They were vampires who were angry that the vein had collapsed. I am leaving now, I said, and I am taking these papers. I grabbed the folder from the table. If you go to the police, Elaine hissed, her voice low and venomous, you will never step foot in this house again. You will be dead to us. I looked at the house, the perfect white picket fence lie. I was dead to you the moment I stopped writing checks, I said. I turned around and walked back down the driveway. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I expected Richard to chase me, to grab me, but he didn't. He knew. Deep down, he knew that he had said too much. I got into my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I locked the doors. I drove away, watching the house disappear in the rearview mirror. The quota, the struggle, the justification. It was all recorded. I drove straight to the police station. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt the cold, hard weight of the phone in my pocket. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what my value was to the Webb family. I was zero. And now, I was going to make sure their bank balance matched my value. Back in the sterile silence of my Riverton apartment, the adrenaline from the confrontation at Brookhaven Ridge began to curdle into a cold, hard focus. I was no longer the daughter seeking closure. I was a forensic accountant dissecting a corpse. My laptop chimed with a notification. It was the email from Arthur Pendleton at Monument Federal Bank. Subject line, Urgent. Documentation request. Case number 89221. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF scan of the original credit card application, submitted electronically 2 months ago. I zoomed in on the signature box at the bottom of the last page. My breath hitched. There, in digital black ink, was my name, Daniela Webb. It was terrifyingly close to my real signature. The loop of the D was slightly too wide, and the cross on the T in the middle of the document was too aggressive. But to an untrained eye, or a bank algorithm, it was a match. Someone had practiced this. They had not just scribbled a name. They had studied my handwriting from old birthday cards or checks I had written for them, and they had replicated it with the intent to deceive. I scrolled down to the metadata section Arthur had included. Source IP, 192.168.1.45. ISP, Comcast Xfinity. Location, Brookhaven Ridge, Colorado. It was the smoking gun. The digital fingerprint was stamped right over my parents' house. I forwarded the entire file to Milo. His reply came within 30 seconds. This is not good. Danny, this is not a crime of opportunity. Forgery requires intent. Using the home Wi-Fi means they felt untouchable. They didn't even bother to use a VPN. They are either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Both, I typed back. I am looking at the merchant codes. Milo texted again. This isn't just Miles buying toys. Look at line item 42. I switched back to the transaction history spreadsheet Arthur had sent earlier. I scrolled down to row 42. Silver Dunes Casino Resort, Brighton Sands, NV, $1,200, airfare. I froze. Miles didn't gamble. He thought it was low class. But my father, Richard? Richard loved the slots. He loved the feeling of being a high roller. I looked at the date, 3 weeks ago. That was the weekend my father told me he was going on a spiritual retreat in the mountains to deal with his stress. He had even made me feel guilty about it, saying his stress was caused by worrying about my career. He had flown to a casino in Nevada on a plane ticket bought with a credit card stolen from me. I felt a fresh wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I needed more. A digital trail was good, but I needed a physical link. I needed to place a body at the scene of the crime. I scanned the list for local purchases. Most were online. Amazon, eBay, crypto exchanges, but one stood out. Tech Haven Outlet, Riverton Central, $2,400. Date, October 12th. That was a physical store. It was only 10 minutes from my office. I grabbed my keys and the folder. Tech Haven Outlet was a brightly lit cavern of glass counters and blue-shirted employees. It was the kind of place where people bought high-end laptops and tablets when they wanted to flash cash. I walked up to the manager's station. The man behind the counter, whose name tag read Derek, looked bored until I slapped the printed transaction sheet and a copy of the fraud alert on the counter. "I need to ask about this transaction," I said, my voice clipped and professional. "October 12th, a MacBook Pro and an iPad Air, paid for with an Obsidian Elite card ending in 4492. Derek frowned, tapping on his terminal. "Ma'am, unless you have a warrant, I can't give out customer info." "I don't need customer info," I said, pulling out my driver's license and holding it up next to my face. "I am the customer. That is my name on the receipt. But I wasn't here. Someone stole my identity. I just need to know if you remember who bought this." Derek looked at my license, then at the receipt on his screen. His eyes widened. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, I remember this sale. It was a big one. Commission was nice." "Who was it?" I asked. "It was a guy," Derek said. "Loud guy, expensive suit, no tie. Kept talking about how his startup was about to go public." "Miles." "Was he alone?" I asked. "No," Derek said. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "He was with a girl, young, maybe 22, blonde, looked a bit nervous." My blood ran cold. I am a brunette. "Did she buy anything?" I asked. "Well, that's the thing," Derek said, scratching his chin. "The card triggered a check ID prompt because of the amount. The guy, the loud one, laughed and said, 'Oh, my sister is treating me today.' He pushed the girl forward. She pulled out a driver's license. The name on it was Daniela Webb. The picture looked kinda like you, but, different hair. I figured you dyed it." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "He introduced her as his sister?" I whispered. "Yeah," Derek said. He said, "This is Daniela. She's the money bags." The girl didn't say a word. She just handed over the ID and the black card, signed the pad, and they left. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. It wasn't just that Miles had stolen my money. It wasn't just that he had forged my signature. He had hired an actress, or maybe a girlfriend. He had brought a stranger into a store, pointed at her, and said, "This is Daniela." He had taken my name, my reputation, my very identity, and draped it over some random woman like a cheap coat just so he could buy a laptop. "Do you have security footage?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "We keep it for 90 days, Derek said. "If the cops come, we can pull it." "They will be coming," I said. "Don't delete it." I walked out of the store into the cooling evening air. I felt dirty. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with bank balances. They had cloned me. They had turned Daniela Webb into a character that could be played by anyone holding a fake ID, as long as it served the family business. I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past. meaningless streaks of color. When I got back to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the dark living room, staring at the blinking light of my Wi-Fi router. I felt exposed. Then, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized. It wasn't a blocked number either. It was a local area code, but not one stored in my contacts. I picked it up. Hello? Ms. Webb? The voice was male, smooth, and deeply unpleasant. It sounded like the kind of voice that cost $400 an hour. Who is this? I asked. I am contacting you on behalf of the Webb Family Trust, the voice said. There was no such thing as a Webb Family Trust. It was a bluff. My clients are very concerned about the erratic behavior you displayed today in Brookhaven Ridge. I am not interested, I said, reaching to hang up. I wouldn't do that, the voice said. It wasn't loud, but it had a razor-sharp edge that stopped my thumb. We are aware that you have made threats regarding legal action. We are also aware of your recent mental health struggles. We have affidavits from family members detailing your paranoia and your history of financial delusions. I sat up straight. I have bank records, I said. I have fraud alerts. You have a narrative, the lawyer said. And so do we. If you file a police report, Ms. Webb, the family will be forced to file a petition for a conservatorship. They love you. They want to protect you from yourself. And if you are deemed incompetent, well, any legal action you take becomes null and void. Are you threatening me? I asked. I am advising you, he said. Stop. Before this gets out of control, go back to work, pay the bills, apologize to your parents, and this all goes away. If you proceed, we will open up your entire life to the court, every medical record, every text message, every outburst. You don't have a case, I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. We have 3 witnesses who saw you screaming in a garden today, he said. And we have a mother who is very good at crying on the stand. Think about it. Daniela, do you really want to lose everything? The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. My hand was shaking. They were not just defending themselves. They were counterattacking. They were going to weaponize the crazy daughter narrative to strip me of my legal rights. They were threatening a conservatorship, the ultimate control. They wanted to legally own me, just like they had financially owned me for years. I dialed Milo. They called, I said the moment he picked up. Who? A lawyer, or someone pretending to be one. He used the C word. Conservatorship? Milo asked, his voice dropping. Yes, he said if I go to the police, they will claim I am incompetent. They will use the breakdown story to invalid my testimony. Milo was silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing. Okay, Milo said. Okay, this is good. Good? I nearly screamed. Milo, they are going to try to lock me up. No, Milo said firmly. This is good, because it means they are scared. You don't threaten a nuclear option like a conservatorship unless you know you are guilty as sin and you have no other defense. They know the fraud evidence is undeniable. They can't argue the facts, so they have to argue the person. What do we do? I asked. If they have a lawyer? We don't need a lawyer yet, Milo said. We need a preemptive strike. They are building a story that you are crazy. We need to build a fortress of sanity. You need to get a psychiatric evaluation. Tomorrow, a voluntary one. Get a clean bill of health from a board-certified doctor. That kills their petition before they can even file it. And the fraud? We double down, Milo said. We don't just file a report for the credit card. We file for the identity theft at the store. We get the affidavit from the manager. Derek, we get the footage. We prove that Miles was impersonating you. That isn't mental illness. Daniela, that is racketeering. They are going to come for me, I said, looking at the door. They are going to try to break me before I can file. Let them try, Milo said. You are the pillar, remember? Without you, the roof falls on their heads. They are flailing. Stay inside. Lock the doors. We meet at 8 a.m. We are going to the station. and then we are going to the doctor." I hung up. I looked at the dark apartment. The ghost lawyer had told me to stop. He had told me to go back to being the good daughter, the payer of bills, the silent victim. But he had made a mistake. He had reminded me of what I was fighting for. I wasn't just fighting for $20,000. I wasn't just fighting for $53,000. I was fighting for my name. I was fighting for the right to be a person, not a resource. I stood up and walked to the door. I checked the lock. I checked the chair wedged under the handle. "Bring it on," I whispered. I opened my laptop. I didn't go to sleep. I started typing. I wrote down every detail of the call. I wrote down Derek's description of the blonde girl. I wrote down the timestamp of the flight to the casino. If they wanted a war of narratives, they were going to find out that I kept better records than they did. And unlike them, I didn't have to lie to make my story stick. The document Milo and I drafted was not a letter. It was a weapon. We did not use emotional language. We did not ask for apologies. We used the cold, hard syntax of the law. It was a formal notice of intent to file federal charges, giving my family exactly 72 hours to pay the outstanding balance of $20,415 on the Obsidian Elite card and to sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the identity theft. If they failed to comply by 5 o'clock on Friday, the draft of the police report attached to the email would be submitted to the Riverton Police Department and the FBI's Cybercrime Division. I sent it via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. Then, I sent it via email to Miles, my father, and my mother. I pressed send at 9 in the morning on Wednesday. The clock started ticking. Day 1 was a waiting game. I went to work at Iron Line Nexus Freight Works, trying to focus on shipping manifests, but my eyes kept drifting to the clock on the wall. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. But the morning passed in a suffocating silence. They were reading it. They were processing the fact that I had actually pulled the trigger. Then came the afternoon. I was in the middle of a briefing with the regional directors in the glass-walled conference room near the lobby when I heard a commotion outside. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Sarah, was trying to stop someone. "Ma'am, you can't go back there without a pass. Ma'am, please." Then I heard the wail. It was a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. It was the sound of my mother, Elaine, performing the role of the grieving matriarch. "My daughter," she sobbed, loud enough for the entire ground floor to hear. "I just need to see my daughter. She is trying to destroy us. She is sick." I looked through the glass. Elaine was standing in the middle of the lobby, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. She was wearing a slightly disheveled cardigan, a calculated choice to look frail and sympathetic. 2 security guards looked unsure of what to do with a crying middle-aged woman. My boss, a stern man named Marcus, looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Is that your mother?" I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and shaking. "Excuse me," I said. I walked out of the conference room and into the lobby. Elaine saw me and escalated the performance. She fell to her knees. "Daniela," she screamed, reaching out a trembling hand. "Please, don't put your father in prison. We love you. Why are you doing this? It was just a misunderstanding." The lobby went silent. Couriers, receptionists, and clients were all staring. This was exactly what she wanted. She wanted to shame me into submission. She wanted to make me the villain in my own workplace. I walked over to her. I didn't offer a hand. I grabbed her arm, gripping it firmly near the elbow, and hauled her up. "Outside," I whispered. "Now." "She's confused," Elaine shouted to the room as I dragged her toward the revolving doors. "She's been under so much stress. She doesn't know what she's saying." I pushed her through the doors and out onto the concrete sidewalk, away from the air conditioning and the audience. The moment the glass doors sealed behind us, the transformation was instantaneous. The tears stopped. Her posture straightened. The frail old woman vanished, replaced by the shark I knew. Elaine shook my hand off her arm and smoothed her cardigan. She looked at me with eyes like chips of flint. "You have gone too far," she said. Her voice was ice. Sending legal threats? To your own parents? Do you have any idea how much stress you are causing your father? You have 48 hours, I said. Stop it, Elaine snapped. Drop this charade. You are not going to the FBI. You are going to withdraw that letter. You are going to pay off the card. And you are going to apologize for dragging family business into the public eye. Do you know that Miles is beside himself? He can't eat. Miles committed a felony, I said, and you helped him. There are things going on here that are bigger than you. Daniela, Elaine said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a menacing hiss. Complex financial maneuvers that you, with your little logistics job, couldn't possibly understand. We needed liquidity. It is a temporary reallocation of assets. It is theft, I said. And I understand perfectly. You stole my name because you maxed out your own credit. If you persist with this, Elaine said, we will ruin you. That lawyer who called you? He is just the beginning. We will paint you as unstable. We will tell everyone about your episodes. We will make sure you never work in this town again. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, threatening to destroy my livelihood because I wouldn't let her rob me. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a folded copy of the ultimatum. Tick-tock, Mom, I said. 48 hours. I turned around and walked back into the building, leaving her standing on the sidewalk. I didn't look back to see if she started crying again. I didn't care. That night, the flying monkeys arrived. I was sitting in my apartment with Milo, eating cold pizza, when my phone started to light up. It wasn't my parents. It was everyone else. My Aunt Carol. Daniela, your mother just called me in tears. She says you are trying to arrest them? How can you be so cruel? Family is everything. My cousin Greg. Hey Dee, heard you're going through a tough time mentally. Just wanted to say, don't burn bridges you can't rebuild. Money comes and goes, but blood is forever. My Uncle Bob. I used my dad's card once when I was 20. It happens. Don't ruin Miles's life over a mistake. Be the bigger person. They were all reading from the same script. The mistake script. The mental health script. They were trying to bombard me with guilt, trying to overwhelm my defenses with a sheer volume of shame. Don't answer them, Milo said, taking the phone from my hand and setting it face down. This is the pressure campaign. They are trying to crack you before the deadline. Day 2 brought a different kind of attack. I was at my desk when my personal email pinged with a security alert. We noticed a login attempt from a new device. I checked the location, Brookhaven Ridge. 10 minutes later, another alert. Failed password attempt on Wells Fargo. They were trying to hack me. They weren't trying to apologize. They weren't trying to pay the money. They were trying to get into my main bank account, probably to transfer the money to pay off the credit card themselves, or maybe just to lock me out so I couldn't afford a lawyer. They are desperate, Milo said when I called him. They are trying to seize control of the assets, change everything again, and I am going to send a message to that lawyer. Milo drafted an email to the firm that the ghost lawyer claimed to represent. He didn't threaten back. He simply stated, my client is currently experiencing unauthorized access attempts originating from the IP address associated with your clients. Be advised that any further digital intrusion will be added to the federal complaint. The hacking attempt stopped an hour later. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a held breath. Day 3, Friday, the deadline was 5 o'clock. It was 2 in the afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen table, my laptop open. The draft of the police report loaded on the screen. I had the submit button for the FBI cybercrime portal open in another tab. I was ready, but I was also terrified. I kept waiting for the money to appear. I kept waiting for a miracle. Part of me, the small, stupid part that still wanted a family, hoped they would just pay it and let me go. Then my email chimed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this it? Was this the settlement? I looked at the sender. It was an unfamiliar Sadriskas, Cloud Admin Temp 99 at. But the display name wasn't random. It said, Miles Web Cloud Backup. I frowned. It wasn't a direct email from Miles. It looked like a file sharing notification. I opened it. There was no subject line, just an attachment. An Excel spreadsheet file named Master Ledger Final Q3 XLSX. I hovered my mouse over the attachment. Why would Miles send me this? Then I looked at the recipient list. To Elaine, Cal at CC, Daniela. My email address starts with Daniela. My mother's lawyer, whose card I had seen once years ago, had a paralegal named Daniel. Daniel. Miles had meant to send this to the lawyer, or to my mother. He had started typing Daniel and the autocomplete on his browser, which had remembered my email from the years I paid for everything, had filled in my name. And Miles, in his panic, in his rush, hadn't checked. He had clicked send. I downloaded the file. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I opened the spreadsheet. It wasn't just a list of numbers. It was a confession. It was a roadmap of the conspiracy. The spreadsheet had columns: date, amount, source, beneficiary, purpose. I scrolled down to the section labeled Obsidian Elite, Daniela account. There were the transactions, every single one of them, but it was the purpose and beneficiary columns that made the room spin. Row 4, 1,100. Beneficiary, Richard. Purpose, Brighton Sands flight, stress relief. Row 12, 4,500. Beneficiary, Elaine. Purpose, retainer for K, Miller, lawyer. Row 20, 800. Beneficiary, Miles. Purpose, client dinner, networking. And then, the column that killed me, the column labeled status. Next to the charge for the watch, the one that triggered the fraud alert, it didn't say mistake, it didn't say emergency. It said, target acquisition, resale pending. And next to the payment for the lawyer, it said, defense fund, preemptive. I scrolled back. The file went back 3 years. It detailed everything. The roof repair that was actually a cosmetic upgrade. The dental work that was golf clubs. And there were notes, little comments in the margins. Next to a transfer from my checking account last year, Miles had written, cash cow milked. Next to the entry for the anniversary dinner, there was a projected cost and a note. D, to cover. If resistance, apply pressure. If resistance, apply pressure. They had planned the dinner ambush. It wasn't a spontaneous reaction to me being late. It was a line item in a spreadsheet. They had calculated the cost, assigned it to me, and scripted a contingency plan if I refused. Milo, I whispered, grabbing my phone. Get over here, now. When Milo arrived 10 minutes later and looked at the screen, he didn't say a word for a long time. He just scrolled, up and down, up and down. He sent this to you? Milo asked, his voice full of awe. He meant to send it to the lawyer, I said. He slipped. This is it, Milo said. He looked at me, and there was a fierce grin on his face. This is the end of the gaslighting. They can't say it was a mistake. They can't say they didn't know. They wrote it down. They have a column for beneficiary, Daniela. They have a column for target. He pointed to the note about the cash cow. That's you, he said. I know, I said. I looked at the file. Master Ledger. They treated my life like a business subsidiary. They were stripping for parts. They had quotas. They had strategies. They had a budget for defense against me, paid for with my own money. The deadline is in 2 hours, Milo said. What do you want to do? I looked at the countdown clock. I looked at the spreadsheet that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my family was a criminal enterprise. We don't wait for 5 o'clock, I said. I saved the file. I made 3 backups. I forwarded a copy to the fraud investigator at Monument Federal Bank. This changes the filing, I said, typing furiously. This isn't just identity theft anymore. This is conspiracy. This is wire fraud. This is racketeering. I looked at the email from Miles one last time. The stupidity of it. The arrogance. He thought he was so smart, playing businessman with his spreadsheets. And in the end, It was his own bureaucracy that hung him. 72 hours is up, I said. I clicked the tab for the FBI portal. I uploaded the spreadsheet as Exhibit A. I pressed Submit. The screen loaded for a second, a spinning wheel of gray. Then, a green checkmark appeared. Submission received. I sat back in my chair. The house was silent. The phone wasn't ringing. It's done, I said. Milo put a hand on my shoulder. No, he said. It's just begun. But now, you are holding the gun. I looked at the cash cow note one last time before closing the window. The cow is dead, I said. And the butcher is next. At 4:18 in the afternoon, with less than an hour remaining on the clock, my laptop pinged with a notification from my new bank. It was a transfer. The amount was $21,415.12, exact change. I stared at the screen, expecting to feel a wave of relief, but all I felt was a cold, hollow validation. There was no apology attached to the transaction. There was no long email begging for forgiveness. There was just a memo line, 5 words typed by my father. Richard, this ends here. Do not contact. He was right. It did end here, but not on his terms. Milo was sitting next to me, his face grim. He nodded once. We did not celebrate. We went to work. Immediately, we transferred the funds to Monument Federal Bank. We paid off the Obsidian Elite card in full, bringing the balance to 0. I stayed on the line with the fraud department supervisor, a woman named Karen, and gave the final instruction. Close the account, I said. Permanently, and I want the file annotated to reflect that this was a case of familial fraud that was reimbursed by a third party. I want it on the record that I did not spend this money. It is done, Ms. Webb, Karen said. The account is closed. We will send you a letter confirming that you hold no liability. That was the shield. Now, we needed the sword. We did not delete the evidence. We weaponized it. Milo helped me compile a digital dossier that was dense enough to sink a battleship. It contained the IP logs proving the application came from my parents' house. It contained the recorded conversation in the garden where Richard admitted to the scheme. It contained the master ledger spreadsheet that Miles had foolishly emailed to me, detailing every dollar they had siphoned from my life. We encrypted the file and uploaded it to 3 separate cloud servers. Then, we sent a certified letter to the law firm representing my family, the one that had threatened me with a conservatorship. The letter was 1 page long. It stated that I was in possession of irrefutable evidence of federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. It stated that if I, or any future employer of mine, ever received a single harassing phone call, legal threat, or smear campaign from the Webb family, the dossier would be released immediately to the district attorney and the IRS. It was a mutually assured destruction pact. I would keep their secret, as long as they stayed on their side of the universe. Then, I wrote the final email. I addressed it to Elaine, Richard, and Miles. I did not begin with Dear. I have received the payment. I wrote, the credit card is closed. The police report is suspended, but not destroyed. I have copies of the ledger you kept. Miles, I know about the quotas. I know about the target acquisition notes. I know everything. I typed steadily, my fingers flying across the keys. From this moment on, I am no longer your daughter, your sister, or your bank. I will not co-sign. I will not lend. I will not bail you out. If you attempt to contact me, show up at my home or call my workplace. I will press charges without hesitation. Do not reply to this email. I hit send. I sat back and waited. It took 30 seconds. My phone, which I had placed on the table, lit up. It vibrated so hard it rattled against the wood. Incoming call, Mom. I declined it. Incoming text. Mom, you ungrateful traitor. After we paid you back? You are going to cut us off? You are cold. Daniela, you are ice cold. Incoming voicemail. Dad. I picked up the phone later to listen to it. His voice was shaking with rage. You think you can just walk away? We made you. You are nothing without this family. You will come crawling back when you fail, and we won't be there." Then came the audio messages from Miles. They were a chaotic mix of bravado and panic. "Daniela, come on. It was just a business strategy. You can't block me. I need a reference for a loan. Danny, pick up." I did not feel the urge to cry. I did not feel the urge to explain. I picked up the phone. I went to the settings. I blocked Elaine. I blocked Richard. I blocked Miles. Then I blocked the aunts, the cousins, the flying monkeys. The silence that followed was instant. It was heavy, yes, but it was the heaviness of a fortress gate slamming shut, keeping the monsters out. Time moved forward. The seasons changed in Riverton, turning the leaves gold and then brown. The fallout rippled outward, reaching me in fragments through the few mutual acquaintances I hadn't cut off. I heard that Richard had to sell the vintage Jaguar. Apparently, without my contributions, the maintenance costs were eating into his gambling money. I heard that Miles was working 2 jobs, one at a call center and one delivering food on weekends. The startup had collapsed the moment the credit line dried up. He had moved back into my old room at the house in Brookhaven Ridge. I heard that Elaine was telling everyone at church that I had abandoned them in their time of need, painting herself as the victim of a heartless child. But her stories were losing traction. People had started to notice that the lavish vacations had stopped. They noticed that the designer handbags were being sold on Facebook Marketplace. The facade of the wealthy Webb family was crumbling, brick by brick, exposing the rot underneath. I did not gloat. I simply did not care. I moved out of my apartment in Maple Ridge. I left the place where I had cried over receipts and feared the sound of my own doorbell. I moved 2 hours away, to a city called North Crest Landing. I took a new job. Iron Line Nexus Freightworks promoted me to Director of Network Operations. It came with a corner office, a significant raise, and a level of responsibility that demanded total focus. For the first time in my life, when my paycheck hit my account on the 1st and the 15th of the month, every single cent belonged to me. There were no secret transfers, no emergency loans, no guilt taxes. I bought furniture that I liked, not what was cheapest. I started a retirement fund. I bought a car that was reliable and safe. 6 months after the cutoff, a letter arrived at my new address. My mail forwarding had let one slip through. It was a heavy cream-colored envelope. Inside was a wedding invitation. Miles was getting married. The bride was a girl I didn't know, probably the next investor he had found to charm. There was a handwritten note on the back of the RSVP card. "Hope you have grown up by now. Mom cries every Sunday. Be the bigger person and come." I stood in my kitchen, holding the card. The old Daniela, the one who tore up the bill at the restaurant but still felt guilty, might have hesitated. She might have thought about the empty seat at the table. She might have wondered if she was being too harsh. But that Daniela was gone. She had died the day she read the words "cash cow milked" in a spreadsheet. I walked to the trash can. I dropped the invitation inside. I didn't rip it up. It wasn't worth the energy. It was just trash. That evening, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my new apartment on the 16th floor. The city of North Crest Landing was spread out below me, a grid of amber lights glowing in the twilight. My phone was on the coffee table. It was silent. It was no longer a bomb waiting to detonate. It was just a tool. I took a sip of wine, a bottle I had bought for myself, just because I wanted to try it. It tasted like freedom. I turned away from the window and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank white page. A steady, rhythmic pulse. I wasn't writing a ledger. I wasn't writing a legal threat. I typed the first sentence of the story I needed to tell, not to complain, not to seek pity, but to document the victory. I had done the one thing they never thought I was capable of. I had chosen myself. I looked at the sentence. I came to my parents' 32nd anniversary, but my family finished dinner. I smiled. It was a good opening. I closed the laptop lid, but I didn't turn off the light. I didn't need to hide in the dark anymore. The door was locked. The money was safe. And for the first time in 32 years, the only person I had to answer to was the woman reflected in the glass. Thank you so much for listening to my story on Lila Revenge Stories. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people.